can just start off by giving some background about Malta, because Malta being a small country, not everybody has a good idea of its linguistic situation. So I think it is better to contextualize what I will be mentioning later on. So Malta was a British colony from 1800 to 1964. So that means that English has a very, very strong presence on the island, but it has historically been multilingual even before that. In fact, even before it passed under British rule, Malta was dominated by the Knights of Malta, who used Italian as their official language. So for many years, even during the British period, Malta was multilingual with Italian and English that were initially the official languages, and Maltese that it was the spoken language and just started being written slowly by the 17th, 18th century without having any official status. Now, Maltese is a Semitic language and is the only Semitic language written in Latin characters. This is just for you to know. So Malta has been officially bilingual in Maltese English since the 1930s, but in reality, Maltese was only used as a specialized language, as a written language in a few restricted domains, notably law, religion, literature, I would say, and also traditional activities. English has always been, and is still to this day, the language of instruction. So all education is done in English, with the exception of religion and Maltese that are taught in Maltese. And just maybe a few other less academic subjects, let's say. English is also the language of correspondence. So when we write emails to each other, we normally use English unless we are, unless we know each other well, and we just you know, informal messages are used in Maltese, and also in technical language. So we use English for all technical domains because we have been educated on English textbooks in English. So it is only natural for us to use English when we are referring to things of a technical nature. As far as spoken language is concerned, informal spoken language is characterized by code switching. So we're always switching from Maltese to English and backwards, happily and carelessly, but it's something that we find quite comfortable. We are quite comfortable with. Things changed for Maltese when it became an EU official language in 2004. In 2004, Maltese was chosen as an EU official language by the government of the time, really not because there was an absolute need for it, but because there was a referendum to decide whether Malta had to was to join the EU or not. And the choice of Maltese as a national language was seen as some type of convincing element that could actually tilt the decision towards membership. I don't know how much that worked, but anyway, Maltese has become an EU official language. Now, this brought about huge consequences for the Maltese language, especially the need for specialized terms for the translation of EU documents, something that was not done before, that was not necessary at all before. So in 2003, before Malta joined the European Union, Malta joined the European Union with the 2004 wave of accessions. In 2003, translation started in earnest with the acquis communautaire that was required in Maltese. And the very few translators at the time who were actually involved in this were actually those in crisis. We're talking about crisis situations. This was a crisis situation for translators because of the lack of terminology and the lack of research on terms that they faced. So basically, in order to translate the EU documents that were required according to the deadlines that they were given, they were following a sort of create-as-you-go policy, where terms were being created by translators themselves without any methodological criteria and with a lack of consistency that was quite natural, considering that everybody was working together but without any previous experience and without having any terminological support to speak of. Real terminology work for Maltese started at the European Union and is still the main location where terminology work is carried out, with the establishment of the Maltese units of the EU institutions, mostly, however, at the European Commission. Terminology work started, and terms in Maltese started appearing also in the Interactive Terminology for Europe, the IATE platform that we currently use. It is basically the essential term base, the main term base we have for Maltese. Sorry, can hear some.
Sorry, could I ask everybody to check that their microphones are on mute? There is some interference there.
Okay, so as I said, IATE is the main term base of reference we use for Maltese even today. And the EU terminologists, the Maltese EU terminologists also include glossaries in a tri-monthly publication called L'accent, which means the accent, and is very useful for us in some domains. In Malta, the only terminology work that is being carried out is done at the University of Malta in two departments. One of them is the Department of Translation, Terminology and Interpreting Studies, the department I currently head, where we teach a course in terminology and translation. So we teach terminology specifically for translation purposes. And the Department of Maltese does terminology work with regard to traditional activities and to domains where terms have been used for centuries, but since these activities are dying out, they are trying to preserve them by collecting them for future generations. So basically, we have two sides of a coin here. One is looking towards the new technical domains or technical domains, terminology for technical domains, whereas the other one is more looking at terminology from a sort of historical, traditional perspective, traditional in the sense of traditional Maltese activities or other areas in this sense. We work with the EU terminologists, both in our course, and also the Department of Maltese does the same for different reasons. We help the EU terminologists who give us lists of terms that our students work on and train upon. We also have students who do their dissertation on terminology. Some of them have actually been found their way in IATE as well, and terms are also used in IATE and also in the Wiktionary, the Maltese Wiktionary. They are used in these areas too. So actually they are of concrete service to translators. Now, what are the issues and challenges we are facing? First of all, we face a very, very tough situation in that we find a lack of awareness at all levels. This lack of awareness about the need for Maltese terms, the reasons why Maltese terminology should exist at all, is found also in official and academic circles. So we find resistance and skepticism with even government departments really just not really seeing the point why Maltese terminology should actually be used instead of just settling for English and moving along. Even in academic circles, we have had resistance, even from some linguists of Maltese who have seen terminology as quite useless since we have English terms ready at hand. Another challenge we face is that of lack of human and other resources. Unfortunately, we do not have professional terminologists because there are no openings for them. Government departments or other companies here in Malta do not require or have not felt the need for terminology work to be done within their domain or their remit. So terminologists that we train in our department end up becoming translators or else doing other or is pursuing other career paths. So unfortunately, the fact that we do not have a terminology center, a national terminology center in Malta, prevents us from actually being able to have some centralized terminology work that we can coordinate and we can promote in a sort of consistent manner. Obviously, this lack of awareness also has effect on funds, or lack thereof, I would say. It is very difficult for us to obtain funds in order to create programs or research projects for terminology, because it is very difficult, as I said, to convince the powers that be that this is a worthwhile activity and that could be useful for the sectors that use these specialized terms, that would need to use these specialized terms, or would be able to use these specialized terms. Very few glossaries exist. Most of these glossaries are compiled by people who are interested in a particular domain. They are found as appendices in books about these types of topics, about particular topics. There is no explanation and no research that is expressly brought to justify the choices and the authoritativeness of these glossaries. So we lack validation even in most of the glossaries we have. But one of the things that bothers me most, to be honest, is the skepticism by end users. So end users, businesses, entrepreneurs, specialists, professionals in many sectors always ask us the same thing. But why do you bother doing terminology in Maltese? What is the point? We use English terms anyway. Even if we speak or send emails in Maltese, something that we very rarely do, we always use the terms in English because they are clearer, they are easier for us to understand, and we never run the risk of ambiguity. This is also a reason that was brought up in certain domains for security reasons. So, for example, when there was a project being done by a student on civil aviation safety, the student was discouraged from actually disseminating the terminology because it could bring about ambiguities that could have an effect on on safety and security. Another important thing to keep in mind is the changes that in the Maltese demographic situation in these last 10 to 15 years. A large number of foreigners have settled in Malta in these last few years, so much so that current estimates tell us that around 25% of the local population is made up of foreign residents. These foreign residents work in a plethora of sectors of the economy, and obviously because they do not know Maltese, English is used as a lingua franca. Even in the university administration, for example, we have a considerable number of non-Maltese speakers who make it necessary for everyone to use English as a lingua franca. And Maltese is sidelined for this reason too. What are the prospects for Maltese terminology? Well, end user resistance will remain strong unless certain things change dramatically. Government intervention doesn't seem to be anything we can really hope for in the immediate future, also because of the large presence of non-Maltese speakers on the island. It would not make sense actually to push for the use of Maltese when this would mean this would have considerable consequences on businesses and on the end users at large. So end user resistance will remain strong. Companies are not willing to take on Maltese terminology if it exists at all in the language. In fact, I am carrying out a survey currently, not without difficulty, I must say, because the respondents are very few. But from preliminary results that I am collecting, I can say that the reasons for resistance are mainly three. First of all, the presence of multilingual staff in all companies that have responded to my survey. So that would not really make sense for them to actually implement a language policy that would encourage or strongly encourage the use of Maltese terminology. Financial and time constraints related to this shift that would be required in order to train staff and personnel to use Maltese terms instead of English terms. And also what they see as a lack of necessity. Since we have terms in Maltese, since both Maltese and non-Maltese speakers alike are acquainted and are very familiar with English terms, it is seen as quite redundant to try to bring terminology, Maltese terminology into these business sectors or the manufacturing sectors. However, I would not like this to be a whole lamentation about the situation. There is a ray of hope, and the ray of hope is coming from the fact that Maltese event is just the same, even though terms will be limited to translation, especially in a new context. Maltese at least will continue to grow and will be in a position to cater better for specialized domains, thanks to the terminology work that we in a general sense, obviously, are trying to carry out despite all these challenges we face. Thank you.